Hello everybody, and welcome as always to Whiskosity Whiskey Reviews. I'm your host, Brian. Today we're going to be talking about the Journeyman Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey. That's a little redundant, I know, but that's what it's called, the Journeyman Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey. And this comes from Journeyman DIstillery, of course. Now, those who follow Whiskosity.com may have been clever enough to realize that the highest rating I've given to this point to any micro-distillery whiskey, or craft whiskey as some people might call it, unfortunately, which I'll talk about momentarily, but, the highest rating I've given to this point is to the Journeyman Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey Batch 1. This is Batch 2. It just came out recently. Is it as good as Batch 1? Well, it's clearly good. As always, I've been drinking a ton of it, and I haven't shared any of this with anybody yet, sadly, embarrassingly. Do I have a problem? I might have a problem. I've only had this for, not even a week. That's a good problem to have, though. But anyway, we'll find out momentarily if it's as good as Batch 1. But Batch 1 I raved about, and I never do that with almost never do that with micro-distilled spirits. And, the big reason is, the same reason I tell people why I don't start a, distillery. Well, one is money, of course, that's a huge thing, and I don't have much of that, especially with a, expensive hobby like whiskey, but, people always say, oh, you love whiskey so much, you know a lot about whiskey, you should start your own distillery, and everything like that, but, one, I'd rather drink whiskey than make it, although I'd love to try making it. It would be fun. I know people who get into it. They say it's, best job. They're so happy they do it. It's not all glamour always. But anyway, the other big thing, though, the other big problem with whiskey, the biggest problem, other than the investment, is also, the time it takes. And that goes hand in hand with the investment, because while you're waiting for whiskey to age, you have to make other stuff or find some other way of making money. A lot of places will sell vodka and gin and other spirits and stuff like that. Some people will make shady deals with the mafia, and I'm just kidding. Some people will prostitute themselves. I'm totally kidding about that, I hope. No, the point is you have to do... It's really hard to, and then the other big thing that some companies do is they will source their whiskey, and this is a big hot topic, and, controversy in the whiskey world is, all these micro-distilled distilleries, they will buy their spirits from another major manufacturer and pretend it's their whiskey. They don't, some places are very upfront, they say on the bottle, but not, people, especially who aren't big whiskey drinkers, will not bother reading the label. Templeton was a big, one of the biggest starters of the whole controversy and stuff like that. And, the company that sells to most other companies is MGP, which used to be LDI, in Indiana. They make great whiskey, but the problem is it's a big controversy because they source their whiskey to so many distilleries to put under their name brand while they wait for their own whiskey to mature and age. So let's face it, the whiskey that you're going to drink in 5 or 10 years is not going to be the same as the stuff that's made by MGP. The other highest rating I've given to a craft or micro distillery was the High West Midwinter Night's Dram, an amazing whiskey, but again, that is sourced whiskey. Journeyman does not source their whiskey. I like Journeyman a lot. They're a great little distillery, and like I said, I don't give accolades to micro-distilleries very often. There are some good points about micro-distilleries that I like a lot. They're very important to the industry. They provide variety, and that's where some of the confusion comes in, because they will get the term craft labeled on them, and that comes from the craft beer industry for the most part. Is, breweries, when beer started to kind of branch out and laws became more relaxed and more people started to make their own beers, and all these microbreweries popped up to compete with the major producers, they got deemed the title craft brews because a lot of them were experimenting with new things, crafting their own special whiskeys that were unique and not your typical recipes. And a lot of whiskey companies are doing that. You can label them craft, but for the most part, unfortunately, people just throw on the term craft to everything that's not the standard whiskey. And that's somewhat of a problem because a lot of it's still standard recipe, standard way of making it, but because it's a micro distillery, because it's new to the market, they call it craft. Okay, and that's not always the case. I frequently use the term craft whiskey, unfortunately, myself. Another reason they get the term craft whiskey is because these craft breweries are making the whiskey. So, beer is halfway the way to whiskey, okay? You have your fermented grains, and that's essentially beer. So you have your distiller's beer, as they call it in the whiskey industry, and then you distill that, okay? You essentially boil it to get the alcohol vapors. For those who don't know the basics of distillation, you boil a beer, the alcohol rises, you collect it, you cool it back down into liquid, and boom, you have your almost pure alcohol, okay? And I won't get into all the differences between whiskey and vodkas and gins right now, but that's basically the point, how you make your whiskey. So these craft breweries decided, you know what? I like whiskey too. We're halfway there. We might as well continue the process. So a lot of your craft breweries are now making craft whiskeys. And of course, there's people who are just starting whiskey from scratch. They weren't craft breweries, but they're making whiskey. But thing is again, laws change. All of a sudden, they're popping up everywhere. That's happening a lot in Ireland and other parts of the world too. Japan, even Scotland, I believe. But Scotland's laws are a little bit different. But still, the point is, craft distilleries are popping up all over the world and everywhere in America. It seems like every day there's a new distillery. Again, it's good for the industry. There's more variety, stuff like that. The problems with craft distilleries are, like I said, though, is aside from, the startup cost, the big thing is the time. The time it takes to age the whiskey. This is not like the beer industry, okay? You cannot just make a recipe and a few weeks later realize it's not so good, try a new recipe or try a new, technique. Whiskey, you don't know for years until you had the right product, because most of the flavor typically comes from the wood that you age it in, and the time you age it, and the type of wood, etc., etc. Point is, you have to wait for it, okay? So you really don't know what you're getting, and that's part of the problem. And it takes refinement. Japanese whiskey is so popular right now, but like I've said before, they had 100 years at least, or basically around 100 years to perfect it. It took time. It wasn't good at first, but they improved their processes. Micro-distilleries in America still have yet to do that. So a lot of their stuff is very youthful, very young. Now there's ways to speed up that process of aging, though, but that's another problem, which a lot of the micro-distilleries try to cheat. They try to do. And again, I've talked about this before. The smaller casks, like the ones I have behind me, typically distilleries don't go that small, but some do. But typically you'll have like a 5-gallon or a 10-gallon or whatever, all the way up to at least 53 gallons, which is your standard barrel size. It's around 200 liters, but the standard is around 53 gallons or so, and that is the U.S. standard barrel size. Scotland has many different sizes. They'll have much bigger than that sometimes if they use sherry casks and stuff like that. But the cask sizes are the big thing, okay? So they use different size casks, and they try to speed up their aging process. And the reason this speeds up the aging process is because you have more surface area touching the spirit, okay? A big cask, you only have so much liquid that are touching the outside and touching the barrel and getting the flavors. A smaller cask, it's touching it a lot more frequently. So aging in something this small in just a few months is the equivalent of, a few years at very least in a normal size cask. Now, like I've also talked about before, though, there's problems with this, okay? That's still cheating a little bit. The flavors are a little bit different. And like I've said, I always equate it to a child that was that their parents wanted them to mature extra quickly, so they sent them to all these private schools, tutors, all these lessons, all these extracurricular activities. Yes, the children are very smart. They might get into high school and college sooner than their peers, but they're socially awkward a little bit. And I say that about the whiskey too, you get these mature notes, even if they're aged younger. But there's still something not quite right about it. It can be interesting, but it can also be a little off-putting. Now, Journeyman, they use a mixture of cask sizes, okay? but they marry them together. That's better than some places that strictly use one size, like a smaller size and stuff. But they do a good job of it. That's not to say it always comes out awkward. You can surprise a lot of people, and I think Journeyman does a really good job of it. So yeah, I recommend all their whiskeys. Okay, they this one is actually 100% wheat whiskey, which is a little bit shocking, which I'll get into when I do the tasting. But it doesn't taste like a wheat whiskey, like 100% wheat whiskey. Bourbons have to be wheat. Don't have to be. What am I talking about? They don't have to be wheat. They have to be at least 51% corn. There's a lot of other rules, but anyway, most of your bourbons will be corn over 51%. Typically up to 80 is more common. You always have a little bit of malted barley for the enzymes, typically around 5%. Some places will go 15 or even higher, but your average you'll see in a lot of places around 5%. And then you have a third grain. It'll either be wheat or rye, okay? Your wheated bourbons are your famous ones, like your Pappy Van Winkles and Fitzgeralds and stuff like that. They're typically a bit sweeter, meet more palates. Your rye whiskeys are a bit more spicier and stuff like that. Or your rye bourbons, I should say. But anyway, Journeyman has wheat in there. It has a wheated bourbon. They have, their unaged whiskeys and even their gins and vodkas are wheat typically. Their unaged whiskey, though, I believe follows their bourbon recipe, which is their Featherbone. And that name comes from the old factory that it comes from. So Journeyman was actually started by a fellow named Bill Welter. And he started the distillery. He actually, he studied in Scotland, not for whiskey originally. It was for golf, actually. His passion was golf. And because Scotland has such a, such a history with golf, he went and he studied over there for a while, and he picked up a passion for whiskey as well, because let's face it, whiskey is pretty popular in Scotland. And he took that passion, he actually helped a friend of his start a distillery in Tasmania, in Australia. And then he came back to America. He studied under Koval, which interestingly, there's some tastes that you get in this that are similar to Koval, but more similar to Few Spirits, for those of you who know it. They're in Illinois as well. And they are all, they all kind of learn off each other. Koval kind of started the whole branching out program, and a lot of distilleries in the area learned from them, including Journeyman. And so he started his distillery, and after looking at about 160 locations, Bill Welter, he opened he started distilling at the old Featherbone factory in Michigan, and they used to make corsets and buggy whips, which is where the name of this comes from, Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey, though it is not their flagship. I believe the Featherbone is their flagship if you would give them a flagship whiskey. They also have a Ravenswood Rye, which is a rye whiskey, but that is actually made with wheat as well. Like I said, all their whiskeys actually have some wheat in them, which I think is cool. But what's odd is their rye is 60% rye and 40% wheat. I don't believe it has any barley. I believe they use other enzymes in the place of barley. And then they have their Silver Cross, which is another big one, which I also have actually. And this one is 4 grains, okay? This one, I'm not going to be reviewing this right now, but I believe I have it on the website, so check it out. But this one is like I said, it's you got all your bourbon basic grains in there, American whiskey grains. You've got wheat, rye, corn, and malted barley. And then that one's good. This one's good too because it's 50% ABV. This one is cask strength, which I'll talk about in a moment, but 50% ABV. Their other whiskeys are usually 40 to 45% ABV. And at the distillery, they have all their whiskeys for 50% ABV that you can buy there too for a little more flavor. Unique to the distillery, it's cool that they're having unique distillery offerings. I love that. That's good. I always recommend that to any distillers. A lot of your big brand distilleries will not do stuff like that, sadly, shockingly. But they do a good job with that. They do other cool things at Journeyman DIstillery. They have a bar there, which a lot of micro distilleries are doing, which again, the big players don't do. I love that about micro distilleries too, is they do unique stuff. So the distillery may close at 5 or 6. The big companies will be like, oh, it's 5 or 6. We've already seen thousands of you people get out of here. We have stuff to do. they don't say that, but that's practically how it feels. But micro-distilleries like Journeyman, they have a bar. They'll keep open until 10 or 11, I believe, or something like that, most or all of the week, and that's really cool. So you get to try their whiskeys all day, essentially, and you get to do unique cocktails. They have good food at the distillery. It's great. It's a really hip, cool location, very hipster feeling. Those of you who don't like hipsters might not like it. I'm indifferent. I'm not a hipster, I don't think, maybe. I don't even know what that means anymore these days. I don't have a beard, and I don't even know the definitions. Let me shut up here before I get all the haters leaving comments like, do you even hipster? Do you even 2015? Anyway, but the distillery is pretty cool nonetheless. I definitely recommend visiting it. Definitely a good experience. So again, I don't support too many micro distilleries. I support what they're doing, but until 5, 10, 20 years pass and they've gotten their game up to the higher levels of the big players, you're not going to hear too many good reviews from me. Journeyman, all their standard bottles, I give slightly above average rating. I enjoy them all thoroughly, but this one knocked my socks off last year, okay? The Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey. And, I gave it the highest rating I've given, like I said, to a micro-distilled spirit. It was a 9.1. It was in the range where I just want to tell everybody about it. Jump on this. And, it wasn't just me. The first time I had it, it was at a bar. From what my sources tell me, last year was only available from the distillery, but some bars got their hands on some. And, it was just amazing. And the bartenders raved about it. The ones who didn't know anything about whiskey loved it, even though it was cask strength. And, which puts a lot of people off. It's so powerful, but it's just so flavorful and good. But even the whiskey, people who are whiskey, experienced whiskey drinkers, everybody kind of raved about it. So I didn't feel so crazy first time drinking it. When I drank it, I only ordered it because I'd never seen it before, which doesn't happen too often at bars, basically, especially bars. And the bartender was just like, oh my gosh, this is such a good choice. You're going to love this. And I did. And I was like, are you serious? This is a micro-distilled spirit. Why am I enjoying this so much? But they really did good with it. So this is batch 2. Do I like it as much? Let's find out. I always just assume, like I say, that you just skip to this part. Or actually, probably skip to the point, since you see the screen caps at the bottom of the video. You probably skip to the point where you see the score. But if you're just going to do that, go to our website, okay? Anyway, Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey batch number 2. How do you pan out? Now, Journeyman also makes, they don't make anything cask strength besides this, as far as I know of. I don't think they make a single malt or anything at this point, unless it's special release stuff, but they do have rum, gin, all that other sort of stuff, like I said, to get money in the meantime. Those are all very good, too. I especially like their Navy Strength rum, which is 57%. I don't think that's officially cask strength, but it's Navy Strength, as they call it, and that's great stuff, too. Anyway, let's see how this is. Their special release, Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey. Okay. Now on the nose, I'm getting there's clear berries. I think it's clear berries. Last year it was more of a port wine type berry nose, I recall. And this is more wild berries and juniper. I'm getting a lot of juniper. Okay, there's like a butterscotchy sweetness too. Marzipan. Peanuts. It's got some spices too, but nutmeg. Last year was more cinnamony in your typical rye spices, which is funny. Like I said, there's 100% wheat, but there's a lot of rye notes, and it almost tastes like a good wheated bourbon as well. But it's 100% wheat, which is amazing. And I'm getting fennel now this time around. Some sulfur as well, so matchsticks and whatnot. Okay, toffee too. Definitely some sweet toffee. The palate. It is so full of flavor. Oh my gosh. And, it's not just because of the cask strength. Obviously, that can trick a lot of people. Because it's cask strength, you just think it has a ton of flavor, but it can still be, very simple. 2 or 3 basic notes, but they're just amplified because it's cask strength. That's not the case in this. I really think it's complex for its youth. I don't know exactly how young it is. Like I said, I think they marry small casks with larger casks. I forgot to mention this bottle at 58.3% ABV or 116.6 US proof. Bottle 373, not that that really ever matters, but okay. Now again with the flavor though, man, I can already tell you it's a long finish. I'll get in the finish again in a second. My gosh, it just goes on forever. Which again isn't just because of the cask strength. It's just, you know, even when I dilute it, it goes on for a while, which again is surprising for its youth. Usually it's a more mature whiskey that the flavors can linger more, or something with really high, you know, where just, again, high ABV, the alcohol tricks you, but it's more of an alcohol-y note. This is not that, okay? The palate, though, is like, it's got so much going on as far as, you have a little bit of everything. It's got the fruits and a tanginess to it, but it's a very sweet too. And then some bitterness kicks in. Okay, it's the bitterness kind of calms everything down. Just when you think it's going to be too sweet, you're like, I don't know, this is too fruity and too sweet and too a little strange, and all of a sudden, other flavors kick in and just fix it. And that's what's amazing about this, is it finds its balance. You know, no matter what you do to it, it's like self-learning. And, you know, again, it's cask strength, so you could add a ton of water. Most people like it. Even novices will like it cask strength. It doesn't matter what you do to it. You could add a ton of water. You can add ice even for people who drink their, you know, whiskey with ice. I'll talk about ice in other videos. It gets a bad rep and stuff like that. It has its problems, but I'll talk about that at other times. I use distilled water usually, but even bottled water, a little trick for people, you know, a little tidbit for people who are going to whiskey tasting events. This is a good time to kind of bring that up, is bring a bottle of water, okay? Because for one thing, it keeps you sober a bit better, because it keeps you hydrated. You know, it's your chaser basically. Well, some events will provide you with water. If they don't, always bring a bottle of water with you for... you know, mostly keeping hydrated. If they have spittoons or little bowls where you can spit the whiskey in or dump it, like take a sip and dump it, you know, don't feel you're wasting it. You know, in some senses you are, but don't always feel you're wasting it. You want to stay sober and sample many things. If you're only there for one or two things, drink it up, chug it, go nuts. Or if you're just an alcoholic, go nuts too. I don't condone that, but you know, to each his own. But the other cool thing about bringing a bottle of water is poke a hole in the top, okay? So you can drink it, take the cap off, drink it. Good. And then if you want to open the whiskey up, and that's what water does, okay? Ice does it too, but it has other problems it does. But water will always open a whiskey up. You want to use a little bit. I used a bunch of spoonfuls. You're probably like, he's adding even more water. Are you kidding me? But that's what's amazing about this whiskey. So you can either do drops like I just did when you have a hole poked in the top, or you can squirt some in. If you're one of those who wants to dilute your cask strength whiskey like this, now I've just added a ton of water to this. I added several spoonfuls, squirted a bunch in. You might be thinking, you've ruined that whiskey, Brian. But no, this stuff, that's why I said it's amazing, is it finds its balance no matter what you do to it. Now I've diluted this down to, it's hard to tell without shaking it or using hydrometer or whatever you call those that test ABV. I've got this down to probably about 43%. You know, a lot of blenders will take their tasting down to 35% on average just to get rid of all the alcohol notes and truly taste the flavors. It doesn't matter what you do this. I've diluted the heck out of this thing. It still finds its balance. It gets a bit weaker, but you know, when you add the water, it almost flips into flavor. Without the water, it's sweet, and then it's spicy a little bit, and then bitter. This, it starts off more bitter with water, and then all of a sudden it mellows out and becomes sweet. Finish is still very long. There's still the bitterness I got before, mixed with sweet and tangy. You get citrus notes and stuff like that on the finish. And some marzipan, and then I got a bit more in the nose, only hints in the palate. But it's got that sweetness too, a little bit more creamy sweetness. Again, it's a little bit of everything, which is amazing for its youth. You know, the one thing though, unlike last year, I get some youthful notes in it. And some youthful notes that are noticeable in Journeyman's other whiskeys that I didn't notice last year in the Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey. Honestly, I was just like looking for them even because I'm like, it's a micro-distilled whiskey. Why am I not getting any of that youth? So creamy and rich and amazing. But this one, there's still the hints of youth, but it's still, like I said, so balanced and impressive. So because of that, it's not quite as world-changing, life-changing. It's kind of exaggerating, but it's not so impressive as last year. It's not a 9.1, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to still stick it with a 9.0, which is being generous right now. I might just be really happy to be drinking it again. But it's still in my region of very impressive. Beat the bar I set for it. I want to tell people about it. It's amazing. It impressed me, especially being a micro-distilled whiskey. Not everybody will agree. Not everybody will like it, but I think even single malt drinkers will like it. It has this like bread-like quality that, a lot of the Scottish drinkers I've noticed, like the few spirits and some of the other whiskeys, micro-distilled whiskeys that I said, they learned from the same place, Koval, and they kind of all share a similar taste. Now, Koval, I think, has cleaner cuts than of the spirit than Journeyman and Few, but you get hints of all of that stuff. So I think Scottish drinkers will even like this too. Scotch whiskey drinkers will like this too, but it's mostly for bourbon drinkers, especially weeded bourbon drinkers and stuff like that. It's very impressive, and if you get a chance to go to Journeyman DIstillery, I definitely recommend it. If you get a chance to taste this, I definitely recommend it. There you have it. I'm going to leave it there, folks. Feel free to leave comments. Let me know. Hopefully you get your hands on it. Feel free to judge me, criticize me, and be like, oh man, you recommended that. I was so happy to try and it was garbage. But, that happens sometimes. I'm just one reviewer. It is just subjective. Anyway, like I said, go out, try new things. Try new things in general. Try micro-distilled spirits, but especially try this one if you can find it. Go out and buy it. If not, that's okay. I will hold it all to myself and buy it myself, and I look forward to next year's release as well. Thanks as always for watching, folks, and as always, enjoy your whiskey, and I'm going to enjoy this. Thank you. Take care. See you next time.